Hello, Sanbonani. Welcome to the third episode of my podcast titled The Side and Divide, where we discuss the different drivers and influences of decision making in the planning profession, especially when it comes to the planner themselves. Our previous episode, introduced the degree to which planners have control over what they choose to think or what they choose to do or how they choose to think, whether they can actually choose to learn certain things or unlearn certain things, whether they can actually choose to think outside of the box or the conventional way of doing things, or are they really bound by the same way of actually seeing space, actually seeing urban problems. Now, today's episodes are direct link to that, because in today's episode we will be discussing self-examination. You understand? So then, self-examination has to do with the topic being, or the title of the episode, being cake binne, which is translated from Afrikaans to being look within. So then this suggests that okay, one must look within when making decisions. You understand? So then self-examination basically goes beyond knowing one's emotions, knowing one's feelings, knowing how one feels, but then it's more of knowing one's values, the reason why someone does what they do, the reason why they choose to do certain things, and the reason why they think the way they think. You understand? So self-examination directly links to how the planning process happens. You understand? So then now we see situations whereby planners tend to want to plan more because out of obligation, because this is the way that things are done. We see a situation in apartheid where several planners asked for amnesty. You understand? Because they said that it was politically motivated and they did not put any of their values into the planning process or into the planning decisions when they were designing for the then known as dormitories of townships. You understand? So then this tells us that what you do relates to how you see yourself. You understand? So then now you make certain choices and address certain issues and areas in certain areas because of how you see yourself in relation to other people. You understand? So then this is the case with the planners back in the during the apartheid era. You understand? So then a philosopher called Socrates, a Greek philosopher called Socrates, said that examining your values gives you reasons for doing things. You understand? And forces you to ask more questions about why you're doing what you're doing. You understand? So then now, do they align with your value? Do they align with how you feel, how you think, or how you see things? You understand? And it helps you also explain and justify your choices before people. You understand? So in today's episode, to help us expand better uh, on this topic, I am joined by my uh, guest, Tamid Khan, who is a fellow colleague who's also doing the honors degree in urban and regional planning. So I'd like to welcome him. Tamid Khan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm well, Yuri. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a part of your podcast series on looking within yourself. So I will look forward to this discussion.
Awesome, awesome. I also look forward to it. Are you ready to tackle, the discussion, to tackle the questions that might pop up, to tackle and discuss and explore how looking within, you understand, could sort of like drive the planning process or the decision making within planning?
As Mr. Incredible says, it's showtime.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, okay. So let's start with the first, question. So, to what extent do you think apartheid planners exercise self-examination? I mean, I've said something about it already. So, to what extent do you think apartheid planners, urban designers, and policy, drafters, to what extent do you think they practice self-examination?
Okay, so in my opinion, right, I'd say that most, it's a fact that most planners in the apartheid days were white, right? And they were chosen
Mm-hmm.
for their specific ways of thinking or their characteristics. So, you would choose as an apartheid government or authority, you would choose people who think the same as you, who have the same aligned visions. Like you wouldn't choose someone who would advocate for integration or spatial justice and that kind of thing. You would want
That's true.
someone
That's true.
You would want someone who thinks the same as you. So, and because most people were white, the planners were white, they were, conditioned into thinking that this is the norm, this is how it's supposed to be.
Okay,
And
okay.
most, and in my opinion, I think most people back in those, in that era, most people line of thinking was were the same. They were indoctrinated into thinking, oh no, we should leave black people far and out of society.
Mm-hmm.
The space is only reserved for the elite or the white people. And in that in that sense, hypothetically speaking, I would say that if you self-examine yourself, you have a conscience. And
True that, true that.
I'm assuming this was the case as well. But back then, planners would have little to no say or independence in their train of thought or freedom in their decision making. What the government or the authority says is what you need to follow. Otherwise, you lose your job or your position. So they
Mm-hmm.
would just go along with what the government proposes, which is okay, you demolish this area where black people are already living, or you evict them and you convert this into like a white suburb, for example. So I believe that most people would not have any issue with something like that. But you obviously would have the people who think deep to themselves, is what I'm doing correct? And for
Mm-hmm.
that you'll
Mm-hmm.
need a conscience. You need,
That's
a
very true.
conscience. And I believe everyone has a conscience, but
Mm-hmm.
everyone also has a choice not to trust or listen to their conscience. They would rather do something that puts them at a benefit or a beneficial position, even if it's at the expense of others.
That's
So
very
then
true.
I believe that most apartheid planners would probably, they would self-examine themselves, but they there's nothing they could have done about decisions that the government or authorities would make on
Oh,
how decisions were carried out. So I believe self-examination, everyone does it, not just uh, not just good people or bad people. Everyone would do it,
mhm.
but it also depends on what you do after that. Do you
That's
change
very true.
do you align with what the authorities are saying as an apartheid planner for the sake of your job, or do you align with your humanness or your sympathetic side and say no, this
True.
is wrong, you can't marginalize people, you have to go and do it the other way.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Like
I
that makes a
believe
lot
to
of
a
sense.
degree, I believe to a degree that everyone has self-examined themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That is my opinion.
Oh wow, like yeah, I like the way you actually explain how you could be one who examines themselves, but then at the same time, you could be someone who's like, okay, I know this is wrong, but because of my job or something, or because hey, I have no say anyway, hey, I'm just a technocrat, you understand? I'm just gonna do it anyway. Hey, whoever gets hurt, hey, I'm not gonna be very responsible for. I guess that's why they were able to actually apply for amnesty, you understand, and allow their applications
Yes.
to be approved in during the dawn of democracy. They were actually able to like, okay, listen, all of this was politically motivated. I just did it because I was an organ, or yeah, I was an organ
Yes.
of the the apartheid system. You understand? I wasn't really thriving. You understand? And
Yes.
this actually
And
links to our previous episode of the the control that people have. You see, are they in control actually in what they choose to do after knowing what they think? You understand? And this also links to an episode that's going to come, our next episode, about their motives. You understand? You mentioned something about uh the job keeping them. You understand? Making them
mm,
ignore maybe their conscience in such a way. And yeah, that's actually something very interesting to think about. Like very interesting. You understand? So yeah. So then on to like our second question, you understand? I would like to know what you, let's say for example, you understand, you were recruited during the time of apartheid. You were like, there was a silver lining somewhere along your life, and then they're like, no, let's choose Tamid Khan to be one of our spatial planners, you understand? So then
mm,
you were maybe asked to like, make a place. They give you like a list of priorities and what you have to do, and then you're like, no, make a an area like El Dorado Park, or Clips Parade West or something, you understand, where that's far from town, that's marginalized and excluded, you understand. I mean, during that time, what would be your response? What would you do given the conditions, given the conditions as a Muslim man, you understand, what would you be able to do by yourself?
That's a very interesting question, because back in those days, we would very rarely find people of color being involved in decision making processes. In
Mm-hmm.
most cases, we would find that those who are actually part of the decision making process and people of color are actually puppets of the apartheid regime, who just,
That's true.
follow instructions from the boss. They
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have any they wouldn't have any opportunity or room to exercise or impose their own authority. And people knew that, you know,
That's true. That's
because
true.
because people of color were not allowed to vote for who they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And same, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, goes for planners. The apartheid government would just choose you based on how um, you were willing to associate or accept their policies or their way of thinking. So, hypothetically speaking, I guess it would be very difficult to draw a fine line and say, I want to do I want to do decision making in such a way that my people would benefit, and at the same time the government would be happy with it.
Hmm.
Because in apartheid, it would actually be very difficult, and I believe that the decision I would make based on my consciousness and my connection to my people, I believe I would have lost my job, because
Hmm.
um,
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't feel that, first of all, I would have gotten the job because I do not align with their way of thinking. And
That's
also,
true.
I'm connected more to my people than the supposed white people. Not to be
Mm-hmm.
racist or anything, but that is a reality, especially if it were in apartheid. I believe that they wouldn't look at me as one of them. They would look at me as a mere puppet of their regime to try and get the community on their way of thinking, and use me as a puppet or pawn to
Mm-hmm.
you know like soften them up and say, okay, we're doing this and this is the only place we can stay, and that. So then I would say it would be a very difficult decision to take, because there would obviously be a lot of compromise from both sides. If I take the government's path, my people would probably disown me, or and I would still be in the same position. I wouldn't really be given any perks or anything. And at the same time, if I do it for the benefit of my people, I wouldn't be on good terms with the government because I went against their orders. So, you know, I feel it would be very difficult to exercise my own independent will or decision making in that situation.
I see, I see. So then but then generally you lean more onto, your people, like you said, like it's like, okay, no, I'm willing to stick with my people. I'm willing to like plan for
Yes,
my people. You understand? So yeah, I get
yes.
it. I get. I get. I mean that's
The
probably why
saying,
I approached you also, because you are a Muslim man, and then knowing most of the Muslim people that I know, you understand, are sort of like very 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 valued in are people centered, if I may say. You understand? They care about
yes,
people. You understand? They've got values that deeply go down to like, okay, we have to care for our neighbor. We have to care for the next person. You understand? They've got
like
uh, a form of
that
Ubuntu amongst
also,
people. You
yeah.
understand?
Yes, yes. And it also affects my line of thinking, because we grow up learning that if that you can't go to sleep, and if you find that unless you find out that your neighbor is well, you can't eat for yourself what your neighbor doesn't have. You always have to be concerned about the next individual more than yourself, because it's that communal sense. So I feel that working for the apartheid regime is in a way betraying that communal self, and
Yeah, yeah,
betraying
yeah.
my people.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
you basically a sellout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's actually also a good word to actually describe it, because you're
Exactly.
compromising your value, the core value, you understand? Like, you self-examine yourself, and then you find this value within yourself, the reason why you act the way you act. And then now you going against that value, sort of like selling yourself out and being as if like, no, hey, this doesn't matter that much, you understand? And like, hey, I feel this, but
Exactly.
then the job is probably more important, or
Mm,
recognition is probably more important, or even money is more important, you understand? We see the situation in
exactly.
ethical problems, in corruption, you understand? Well, yeah, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for your input, man. We really digging into this very well, you understand? So then, for my third question is that, if your self-examination, you understand, let's say you still, lucky day, you understand, lucky, you're very lucky to still be chosen by the state, although it's very unlikely, by the apartheid state, although it's very
Mm,
unlikely. But then let's say you still are, very likely to be chosen by them, are chosen by them, I mean. And your self-examination led you to agree, and democracy came about. Let's say your self-examination said, okay, you know what, um I feel like, okay, we have to, keep people in good places. We have to plan spatially for people, but then the story, or their justification of like, no, but people have to live together. All the same type of people have to live together. Maybe they use that to get you, and you're like, okay, you agree with that principle, and then you went with that value of like, okay, we do deserve
mm,
to stay with our own people. You understand? So then let's say that led you, you understand, to like agreeing to being an apartheid plan, a spatial planner, and then 94, 96 came, democracy, the dawn of democracy came about. Do you think that you would approach the TRC and ask them for amnesty like many did, and say that, no, what I did was because I was politically motivated, you understand? So then I'd like to know if, okay, you agree to like, okay, we have to all stay together. That thing got you to make spatial areas like, the townships that you find today. But at the same time, when democracy comes, you're like, okay, I realize what I did was wrong. I'd like to ask for amnesty. Would you do that?
I think I certainly would. As a planner, I feel we have and we still are in in a difficult position in society. Like we are responsible for planning things, but we do not have that capacity, or we didn't have that capacity to exercise our own inputs, our own decisions. We would always have
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm,
consider what the higher ups want in terms of something, and our job is to just translate it on a spatial language. So then I would say that I would, especially considering I'm non-white and would be an apartheid planner, those two are already constraints on my side. So I would
yeah.
say my self-examination would, or my conscience would not agree with ostracizing the people from society or from the urban centers, but my decisions would primarily be politically, not even politically motivated, because I wouldn't probably agree with the sentiments proposed to me, but I would only do it to have security for my job, my family, my social standing, my well-being. That would be my only reason to work for the state in those days. But and for that reason, I definitely feel that my case would be valid to be brought forward to the Truth and Reconciliation Council, because I would not be a primary decision maker. I would be influenced. I would have to consider so many inputs and opinions before I do things. So in that sense, I'm already constrained. I'm already bound to, you know, regulations, to opinions, to all that. So I feel that I would have to, seek amnesty for my decisions, because it would be from an honest point of view.
Nice, nice. I see like the consistent battle of like, okay, you know, this is what I believe is right and which is right, objectively correct. But then because of probably a subjective, issue, for a subjective, feeling of like, okay, I need to keep my job, I need to be seen in a certain way, you understand? I have to do what they ask me to do. So we see us a degree of shame, of shackles on, the planning profession. You understand? We're out there, we're going to go do amazing things, but then we find ourselves ending up in shackles. You understand? We end up being
Yes, yes.
subject. We end up being subject to, our authorities. We end up being subject to, policy and whatnot. And then if we want to break out of this, you understand, we have to like work very hard to like put
Mm.
our values forward and say, no, this is not correct, man. Like, yeah, I appreciate you pointing all these things out, man. Now for, just the final, discussion point, you understand? So then, Socrates, the Greek philosopher I spoke about, says that the examined life helps appreciate other values, you understand? So that's one thing he said back then. And then another thing he said was that the unexamined life, you understand, is not worth living. So I want to know, what do you think about these statements that he made? Firstly, the examined life helps appreciate other views. You understand? What do you think? Do you think this is true? Like, you examining yourself makes you appreciate and say, okay, this view is probably better than mine. What do you think? You examining yourself means that you are right fully?
Yes, I agree with that statement because we are, well, let's say 8 billion people in the world. Not everyone thinks the way you do, and they are not always wrong, but you have to understand that because everyone at some point would do a self introspection or a reflection of themselves, and they have reasons for why they do certain things. And for us to be non-binary thinkers, it would be very beneficial and helpful to get along with other people, to understand their points of view, and make society a more harmonious place.
So,
Because
so you argue that examining yourself sort of like pushes you not to think binary, makes you question. You understand a
yes,
lot of things, pushes you not to think binary. Nice, nice. That's that's actually a good point. I won't lie. That's a good point. But then, okay, how about the second statement that he made, saying that the unexamined life is not worth living? You understand? Saying the life that you do not analyze your values, or the reason why you do what you do, or the reason why you think the way you think, or the reason why you might choose or decide to be an apartheid spatial planner or not choose to be one. You understand? Like, do you think that type of life is worth living? Do you think this statement sort of like has some sort of sense to it?
I agree with that because if you do not examine yourself, what makes you different from a robot? What makes us human is
Mm,
we have
mm,
our
mm.
own thoughts, we have our own way of thinking, we have our own opinions, we're able to formulate judgments and opinions, and that makes us unique.
Yeah,
So what is the point if you cannot come up with your own opinions? You just subjected to whatever you are told, you just do whatever you're told. You don't have the capacity to think or with your conscience, and this is right or this is wrong. And I believe that what is the point of living? You do not consider implications of what you're doing, and that in a way it's
true.
quite dangerous because you
Oof,
may not only be harming yourself if you do not think of the consequences, you may also be harming those around you, or you may be
that's
harming,
very true.
and as a planner you would be harming the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very important to self-examine yourself when when you make decisions or they undertake anything in life, not just planning, because you know we it is in our nature to question things. Why is this the way it is? Or why do I have to do this? So, and that's what makes us human. So, in my opinion, if you do not have an examined life, you are you are nothing different to a robot or a sheep, because you
Yeah,
are not
yeah.
thinking with your own unique capacity or intellect. That is my opinion.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I get you, and I totally understand it, man. Like, yeah, like that's why many of the times, in the literature that I've read, many of the time planners are referred to as technocrats, apolitical people, people who dance around the gray area. You understand? People who are like, just to be
Mm.
used, the yes men. You understand, the yes men, or
Yes, unfortunately,
the
that is
professional.
what that is what we are perceived as, because
As
we do not have the authority to to have our say, because we do not have the protection that we require, you know.
yeah,
So
that's
then
very true.
people view us in a negative light in many
Uh,
cases.
that's very true. That's very true, man. No, yo, yeah, this was actually, very mind-opening conversation. You understand? We juggled a lot, and we've discussed two things. You understand? Value and motives. You understand? And I appreciate actually having you here, and I thank you very much for your contribution, Tamid Khan.
It was a
Um,
pleasure for
yeah,
contributing to this discussion
yeah,
and
yeah.
research.
Yeah, I think we should have more discussions concerning, planners' power into planners' power, to choose to actually do what they want to do, and their shackles. You understand? If they can't be free from the shackles of professionalism or authority, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Tanika. Thanks,
It
thanks,
was a
thanks.
pleasure. I wish you
Thanks.
the best in
Oh,
your project.
thank you, thank you, thank you. So, just to recap, you understand. So, all the episodes link here. In one episode, we can discuss something that's going to link to the next episode, or it's going to link to the previous episode. Here, we see a link to the previous episode about, the power, the control over what you do, the control over how you choose to think, indoctrination. And then we also saw the next episode, motives. You understand why you're actually doing what you're doing. You understand, we see that values are very important. You understand, values are looking within yourself. When you take binne, when you look within, you understand, you're able to see the values and the reason why you do what you do. And this is very interesting and something that planners should think about, and planners should sort of like take a stand in, I think, and I believe so. Yeah, so then thank you all for listening to this podcast. Thank you all for staying this long. Um, Please be sure to tune into the next episode, which talks about motives. So that's it from me and my guest Hamid. Until the next episode, thank you and goodbye.